We didn't know his guns were empty. Neither did they. Howard's tactical genius shifted into pure psychological warfare. Aggression became his only weapon, positioning his only ammunition, the illusion of lethality his only defense. An FW-190 rolled in from above. Howard turned into him. Head-on approach. The German's guns sparkled, tracers reaching out. Howard held course. Didn't fire back because he couldn't, but his Mustang's nose aimed straight at the Focke-Wulf. The German broke first, rolled away at the last second. Survival instinct, overriding mission. Luftwaffe Oberleutnant Heinz Knoke, Jagdgeschwader 11, later wrote in his diary, "One American pilot fought with reckless abandon. His attacks were suicidal in their aggression. We assumed he was either an ace or insane, perhaps both. His presence alone disrupted our formations repeatedly." The bombers reached their initial point, turning onto the bomb run, the most vulnerable phase, flying straight and level, no evasive maneuvers, perfect targets. German fighters sensed the opportunity. They pressed harder, multiple attacks from different angles. Howard flew like a man possessed, diving between bomber formations and attacking fighters, positioning his Mustang where it would do the most psychological damage, making the Germans think twice. His fuel gauge was redlined, warning light glowing. Maybe 5 minutes of fuel remaining. 5 minutes before his engine quit. Before he became a 30-ton glider over Germany. Before he died or became a prisoner. Captain Marion Mixon, pilot of Slightly Dangerous, witnessed the final minutes. The Mustang was still there, still attacking. We saw him make runs on German fighters that broke off. He was saving us. One guy against the whole Luftwaffe. It was the bravest thing I ever saw. Bombs away. Oh. The B-17s released their loads. 1,200 tons of high explosive falling toward the Focke-Wulf factories below. The bombers turned for home. German fighters made final attempts, desperate to get kills before the Americans escaped. Howard intercepted every one he could reach, bluffing attacks with empty guns, flying on fumes and determination. Then, gradually, the German fighters broke off, turning back toward their bases, low on fuel themselves, low on ammunition, frustrated by the single Mustang that had denied them. The bomber stream reformed, heading west, heading home. Howard's fuel warning light was solid red, engine temperature climbing. The Merlin was about to quit. He pointed his Mustang west, following the bombers, hoping he had enough fuel to reach friendly territory. His radio crackled. "Unidentified Mustang, this is Dry Martini 4. What's your fuel state? Can you make it home?" Howard keyed his mic, voice calm despite everything. "Dry Martini 4, I'll make it. Just keep those bombers together." Lieutenant William Lawley, co-pilot on another B-17, later said, his voice was steady, like he'd just been on a training flight. "We were all shaken up from the attacks. He sounded like it was another day at the office." The English Channel appeared ahead, gray water stretching toward England. Safety. Home. Howard's engine coughed once. Fuel starvation. Then caught again, running on vapor. The English coast. Boxted airfield. The runway. Howard dropped his landing gear. Lined up on final approach. Touchdown. His engine quit as he rolled to a stop. Complete fuel exhaustion. Not a drop remaining. Ground crews swarmed the aircraft, checking for damage, finding none. But when they checked the ammunition bays, they found something impossible. Being empty. Completely empty. All 2,400 rounds expended. Howard had flown the final 10 minutes with no ammunition, no fuel reserve. Nothing but courage and audacity. Howard climbed out of his cockpit, legs stiff from 2 hours of combat tension, hands shaking now that the adrenaline was fading. Sergeant Gladdock stared at the empty ammunition bays, then at Howard, then back at the bays. "Major, you fired everything?" Howard nodded. "Every round. The debriefing room filled quickly. Intelligence officers, squadron commanders, and bomber crews who had landed minutes before. Captain Ralph Johnson entered first, walked straight to Howard, extended his hand. "You saved my crew. All of us. I don't know how to thank you." Behind him, more bomber pilots crowded in. 30 crews. Then 50. Then over 100. All telling the same story. One Mustang, alone, fighting 30 German fighters, for over 30 minutes. The intelligence officer took notes rapidly, cross-referencing accounts, looking for exaggeration, finding none. Every witness told identical stories. CBS war correspondent Andy Rooney was at Boxted that day, covering the 8th Air Force for Stars and Stripes newspaper. He listened to the debriefings in stunned silence. Rooney later wrote, "I heard bomber crews describe something that sounded impossible. One fighter pilot against 30 German fighters, protecting 300 bombers, empty guns, empty tanks, still attacking. If I hadn't heard it from over 100 witnesses, I wouldn't have believed it." Major Don Blakesley reviewed Howard's gun camera footage. The film confirmed everything. 6 confirmed kills, multiple additional damaged aircraft, aggressive attacks from impossible angles, and timestamp evidence showing continuous combat for 37 minutes. Technical Sergeant Bill Fleming told investigators that pilot saved 3,000 American lives, maybe more. "Without him, the Germans would have torn us apart. I saw B-17s go down on other missions. 10 men per plane. We should have lost dozens today. We lost none in our formation. Because of him." The paperwork began immediately. Witness statements, official citations, evidence compilation, gun camera analysis. Within 48 hours, the recommendation was complete. Medal of Honor, the highest military decoration, for valor above and beyond the call of duty. General Jimmy Doolittle, 8th Air Force commander, reviewed the file personally, read every witness statement, studied the gun camera footage, examined the tactical diagrams. He signed the recommendation without hesitation. "This is the most extraordinary single fighter pilot action of the war. Major Howard's courage and tactical genius saved hundreds of lives. He deserves the Medal of Honor. America needs to know what he did." The award ceremony took place months later, presented by General Doolittle himself, at a ceremony attended by over 2,000 personnel. Howard stood at attention as the citation was read. "For conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity above and beyond the call of duty, on January 11th, 1944, Major Howard volunteered to lead a group of P-51 aircraft. Upon sighting enemy bombers attacking the formation, he immediately attacked. When all his ammunition was expended, he continued to make passes at enemy aircraft. His actions enabled the bombers to reach their target without excessive losses." The official citation was bureaucratic, formal, understated. It couldn't capture what actually happened. But the men who were there knew. Lieutenant Colonel James Stewart, mission commander, spoke at the ceremony. "Major Howard is the bravest pilot I've ever known. He could have left, should have left. No one would have blamed him. But he stayed, fought with empty guns, saved 300 bombers, saved 3,000 lives. That's not just bravery, that's immortality." Howard's response was characteristically modest. "I was just doing my job. Any pilot would have done the same. I had the best airplane, the best training, the best opportunity. I just took it." But the bomber crews knew different. They knew what he'd done, what he'd risked, what he'd saved. Captain Marion Mixon summed it up simply: "Major Howard is why we came home. My crew, my friends, 300 planes full of American boys. We owe him everything." James Howard became the only fighter pilot in the European theater to receive the Medal of Honor for a single day's action. The rejected applicant who proved everyone wrong, the quiet veteran who became a legend, the man who fought 30 fighters alone and won. Major James H. Howard survived the war. He flew 62 combat missions total, shot down 6 confirmed enemy aircraft, probably destroyed 3 more, damaged several others. But January 11th, 1944 would define him forever. After the war, Howard remained in the newly formed United States Air Force. He served with distinction through the Cold War, commanded fighter squadrons, trained the next generation of pilots, rose to the rank of brigadier general. He never spoke much about Oschersleben. When asked, he'd deflect, change the subject, insist others deserved more credit. His family learned not to ask. Colonel Robin Olds, legendary fighter pilot who knew Howard, recalled, "Jim was the most humble man I ever met. He'd won the Medal of Honor for the most incredible fighter action of the war, but he acted like it was nothing special, like anyone would have done the same. That's what made him special." Military historians spent decades analyzing Howard's tactics that day. How did one pilot disrupt 30 fighters? The answer was psychological warfare combined with tactical brilliance. Howard understood that fighter pilots want to live, even German aces, especially German aces. By attacking aggressively, he forced defensive reactions. By never staying predictable, he created uncertainty. By bluffing with empty guns, he exploited their caution. Modern fighter tactics still teach Howard's principle. Aggression disrupts enemy coordination. Boldness creates psychological advantage. One determined pilot can change an entire engagement. But tactics alone don't explain Oschersleben. What Howard did required something beyond skill, beyond training, beyond tactical knowledge. It required courage that defied rational calculation. When his ammunition ran out, doctrine said leave. Self-preservation said leave. Common sense said leave. He stayed. When his fuel gauge hit empty, every regulation said return to base. Survival instinct said return to base. Logic said return to base. He stayed. He stayed. Not because he was reckless, because 300 bombers needed him. 3,000 American boys needed him. And he refused to let them down. General James Doolittle, years after the war, reflected on Howard's action. What Jim did that day represents everything we value in a warrior. Skill, yes. Courage, absolutely. But more than that, selflessness. He put those bomber crews above his own survival. That's the highest form of military service. Howard retired from the Air Force in 1966. Brigadier General James H. Howard, Medal of Honor recipient, Distinguished Flying Cross, Air Medal with oak leaf clusters, Chinese Order of the Cloud and Banner. He settled in Florida, lived quietly, avoided publicity. On March 18, 1995, James Howard died. He was 81 years old. He was buried at Arlington National Cemetery, Section 8, grave number 381-4, with full military honors. His headstone lists his rank, his decorations, his service dates, but it doesn't capture what he really was. The pilot they rejected who became irreplaceable. The quiet veteran who fought like a demon. The man who saved 3,000 lives in 37 minutes. Today, fighter pilots still study his tactics, his aggression, his adaptability, his refusal to quit. The Air Force Academy teaches his story to cadets as an example of tactical brilliance, as a lesson in courage under fire, as proof that one person can make a difference. But perhaps the best memorial to James Howard comes from the men he saved. The 3,000 bomber crewmen who came home, who lived full lives, married, had children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren. Thousands of descendants who exist because one rejected pilot refused to leave. Technical Sergeant Charles Johnson, who watched the fight from Jersey Bounce, lived to age 93. Before he died, he told his grandson about January 11th, 1944. "I shouldn't be here. None of us should. The Germans had us. We were done." Then one Mustang dove in. One pilot, alone, fighting impossible odds. He saved us all. Everything I've lived since that day, every moment with your grandmother, your mother, you, all of it exists because James Howard wouldn't quit. That's the real legacy. Not tactics, not medals, not military history, but lives. Thousands of lives, generations of families. All because one rejected pilot proved that courage and skill can overcome impossible odds. All because Major James H. Howard looked at 30 German fighters and decided they weren't going to win. All because when every rational calculation said leave, he stayed. The greatest fighter pilot story of World War II. Not because of the kills, but because of who he saved and who he was. A hero who never wanted to be called one. A legend who lived like an ordinary man. A warrior who understood that real courage isn't fighting without fear. It's fighting despite it. James H. Howard, Medal of Honor. Brigadier General, Flying Tiger. The fighter ace. But first and always, the pilot they rejected who saved 3,000 lives and changed history.